Welcome everyone. And since we're all in here, I'll go ahead and share the screen with our lovely pictures. And yeah, so thank you. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We enjoy doing these presentations when we're all stuck inside. We can, still talk about the outdoors, which is really nice. And hopefully you get something out of this. So I think the basic format for Jeff and I is we're gonna, present a lot of information tonight, but if at any point you have a question, you have a comment, you have a story to share even, feel free, put it in the chat, raise your hand, whatever it is, and we can open it up. We have a nice, small group, so we can have some more discussions if you're interested. But I think to get us started, we'll go ahead with just some introductions. And if you all would like to also share, we'd really appreciate it. You can keep your camera off. That's not a problem at all. But we'll just kind of go around just so we have a basic understanding about you as well as this topic and maybe any of your experience with it. So we kind of know where the group is. And so I can start since I'm already unmuted. My name is Jen and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am currently a final year PhD candidate in the School of the Environment, getting my degree in environmental and natural resource sciences. And I'm here because on the side, I also like to serve as an adventure facilitator with the Outdoor Rec Center. So that's kind of why I ended up in Pullman. I am, even in the virtual environment, still in Pullman. Gotten outside a little bit, but I think my favorite place I've traveled to, it's always hard. I'm going to say the Grand Canyon. I'm from Arizona, and that just, has a nice place in my heart. So that's still my favorite. And I apologize for my dog as she does this all the time. And then have I ever done a solo trip? Yes, I have. I've only done a couple like completely by myself. They are usually only 1 or 2 days. And then I've done a handful more where I have a dog with me and I feel a little safer and more productive with my pup. So I have a little experience, couple in the back country, some in the front country, but we can talk about those and share those a little bit later. So Jeff, you want to go?
So my name is Jeff. I prefer he, him, hey, they. Pretty easy. I'm studying computer science right now, and I'm also an AF, clearly. And right now, I'm currently located in Pullman. My favorite place I've traveled to, I have to say, is Glacier National Park. There's something like magical about mountains. Like I never realized how awesome they were until I went there. And then, have I ever done a solo trip? Yes, that was actually my first solo trip. I bike packed all the way up from the what do you call it? The Going to the Sun Road, which is like probably the most scenic road in America. And it was like probably the most surreal experience I've had. So yeah.
I think with that, we can get going. So it seems like a little experience or none, which is totally fine. And it seems like kind of the first step for all of getting onto a solo adventure is like, how do you decide to try it, right? Because it is very different than going with a group of your friends or family. So how do you take that leap? And one way that we like to think about it is using like the idea of comfort zones. And so you can see just a very simple diagram. That center comfort zone is where it's like, I do this all the time, not a big deal. I enjoy it. You might learn a new skill or two, but there's not a lot of stress that goes with it. Then that green one is what we call the stretch zone. This is a little bit more learning, might be somewhat new, trying a different aspect of something. And then red zone is like, oh boy, this is beyond my comfort zone, beyond my stress zone. I'm not sure I really enjoy doing this. I'm not sure why I'm doing this. And there's a lot of stress that goes with it. We like to try to get into that stretch zone. And that's hopefully where at least your first, second, or third solo adventure might fall. So one way to think about this is just with daily tasks. Right? So say we were actually talking about this before everyone joined, speaking in front of large crowds. Where do you kind of feel this might fall? And so if possible, on Zoom, if you've used this feature before for annotate, You can see it at the top. It's like a little pencil. Let me know if you don't see it, but you can click annotate. Or maybe not at the top, I moved my screen, but where your like control panel is on Zoom. Yeah, it's just like that. So you can choose a stamp, you can draw, but just with this idea of speaking in large crowds, where does that fall for you? Do you feel like, and you can click on the target itself. So Jeff, red zone, totally understand. Stretch, yep, stretch. That tends to be stretch on the border of stretch and red. Okay, right? So that's something where there's a little more stress to it, maybe. Okay, let's try another one. How about going to like just a new place, somewhere you've never been before? How do you feel about that? Okay, much more comfortable going to a new place. That's good. And then let's say moving a little bit more into solo adventures. What about just traveling alone? It might be somewhere you're familiar with, but just traveling by yourself in general. Okay. Still comfort to stretch. That's good. What about overnight camping or backpacking? What is our feeling about that? Being outside by not necessarily by yourself, but just outside at night, sleeping outside. Okay, pretty comfortable. Awesome. Okay, and then let's do one more. How about going on an extended outdoor trip, say 4 days or more? Okay. And I understand this one. This is where we lose showering and we lose technology and we lose all of the comforts. But that's good to know. So, like, this is the idea that when we're talking about all the different aspects of going on a solo adventure, just kind of relate it to how far out of your comfort zone are you willing to go? And it is a process, it's a learning experience, right? Going from just camping in your backyard, right? Trying out your equipment by yourself, making sure you can use everything, to like going on a backpacking trip by yourself, right? It's a large scale, and just kind of figure out what are the steps you need to take to make yourself ready to do this. And then Jeff, you want to talk about fun?
Started talking, was muted. Anyways, so there are 3 types of fun, right? The first type of fun is type 1, and that is fun. Like the activity that you're doing every step of the way is considered fun. And like that's what we imagine what our adventures would be like. So this type is basically what happens when your plan comes together. Like the weather lines up for your hike, it snows for your ski trip, or you catch that magical day on Mount Washington where it's warm and sunny without a hint of wind. And for others, it can also be catching every wave, cruising through a crux, powder days, splinter cracks, and cold beers next to a warm campfire. This is what you brag to your friends about, and they are sad that they couldn't be there. And then you have type 2, which is personally my favorite type. And it's like, it's weird. It's a strange beast because it really actually isn't fun at the moment. It's more like suffering, which is, can be cool in a context. So it's only after event and reflection that you come to realize that you actually had fun. So like wading through chest deep snow, dirty and loose rocks, sketchy approaches, and hikes that never seem to end. Anything that offers an overriding sense of doom and despair are clear indications that you're having a type 2 experience. And so type 3, ironically, is not very fun at all. But so the fun doesn't surface when it's happening, and it doesn't appear later in reflection. Rather, it's the type that makes most of us go back to type 1 and say, the heck with type 2 is close to type 3. Or we often learn something from our suffering during type 2 that furthers our outdoor knowledge and experience. Type 3 is what chases us away from activities together. So personally, I haven't done any type 3 stuff. I imagine that would be like mountaineering for your first time and then like a blizzard hits. Like that's pretty terrifying. But I've done a number of type 2. Actually, my first solo trip was a type 2, and it was biking that road. I started it when it was like heavy rain, and I did this during like the peak of COVID. So there was basically no one there, and that's why I wanted to do it. And as I was going up the mountain, I just thought to myself, what if a bear attacks me? What if I die? But then I rounded this corner and I saw this magnificent view, and it all just went away. But then it went again. It comes back over time and time. But like, there are moments where you just have this like sense of like greatness that comes with it. It's kind of like you have to take the bad with the good. Like, you don't fully appreciate how great something is until you can like see how bad it could be. So I'm just going to open it up to you guys to tell us about what you experience with these different types of fun. So Jen, you want to start?
Yeah, I was just trying to think, and I don't know if I've done any type 3 either. And I don't know if that just means I haven't like taken myself far enough out of my comfort zone, or is it just I'm always, finding the bright silver lining of it. But I could imagine, again, being from Arizona, I like heat, I like sun. And so yeah, if I'm asked to go on like a week-long mountaineering trip at the top of Mount Rainier, I don't know how fun I would find that even after reflection. I think
Yeah.
that'd be pretty miserable during and after. But type 2, I'm with you. I'm all about type 2. I feel like anytime I try something new, rock climbing, rappelling, snorkeling, anything like that, it might be hard in the moment trying to learn the skills, being frustrated, but I feel like after it's like, I need to do this again,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Anybody else? Anybody have a type 3 story? They tend to be rare.
I think now that I think about it, a type 3 for me would probably be the first time I learned to swim. Like, I actually did not touch the water for a good decade after those
Oh
lessons.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Yes, that would be an example of type 3 where you're at, even after you're like, I'm not doing that again. To try to convince everyone to at least try this out, there are a bunch of rewards that come with doing a solo adventure. One is for those who do have some, basic skills and knowledge that maybe you don't use a lot, right? You don't go camping, you don't go backpacking, kayaking, anything outdoors a lot. It gives you a chance to really practice those skills because you can't rely on someone else. It is really up to you to be able to use navigation, set up a tent, filter your water, whatever it is. Which, not gonna lie, gives you some confidence that, hey, I can do everything by myself, which is pretty awesome. Also, it lets you discover your weaknesses. That is very true. I've realized my first few trips, I was not good at cooking outside. My food was like never fully cooked. That took some practice, finally got there, but made me realize I needed to practice that a little bit more. Also, maybe not as important in the virtual environment where we're alone a lot more than normal, but in theory, it does give you a chance for some solitude. You get to hike at your own pace. You get to set your own agenda, your own trip. It really is up to you, and anything you want to try, you're able to. Kind of building off the first one, that independence, self-reliance, it really is on you to make it from point A to point B and back. And so helps with those skills as well. More intentional and present with your thoughts, right? You're not distracted by someone else or other people. You're really thinking about whatever is in your head, which can be good and bad. I don't know, but it gives you a chance to really be present with yourself. And a big one for me, and I will say this is true on my own experience, you get to see a lot more wildlife because you're quiet, you're by yourself, you're not scaring away the wildlife as much. Which we'll get into wildlife and the hazards that come with that. So it could be negative, but in general, you get to see a lot more when you're by yourself usually, which is pretty awesome. You're not talking to someone else. You're not looking at someone else. Your eyes are really just scanning, and you get to see some really cool things.
Cool. So how is solo travel different? Well, you are your own weakest link. So if anything happens, you're gonna have to figure it out. Like, if you forget a gear or it breaks, it's just there's things that you just have to tend to. So, and then situational awareness and prevention are paramount. You want to be able to know what's going on because there's no one else to help you. Like, no one's gonna have your back. So being keen on the environment is uh, paramount. And then, so because you're isolated, you need to get as much knowledge about where you're going and what's happening. That way you can make the best decisions for yourself. So like whenever this, like for example, this summer, I hiked a trail over in the Olympic National Forest, and I wanted to see a waterfall, right? So I was like, all right, I'll just go to this waterfall, and I ran this trail, and then along the trail, I noticed there was another trail called Mount Storm King. I'm like, oh, this sounds like a cool trail. So I just like skipped it, and I thought I'll just visit on the way back. And then when I reached that waterfall that I wanted to see, it was so dinky that I was like, you know what? I don't feel satisfied. I'm just gonna go on another adventure. That Mount Storm King trail was the hardest trail that I've ever done. I didn't do any research, but I was still able to, finish it because I had prepared for extra things. But yeah, like the best thing you get out of this is like to really know your equipment and all the like what you can handle. That way, if something happens, you'll be okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Also a good point of you need to plan ahead and prepare, which we'll get to. But yeah, it is different. And if you want to go walk on some sand dunes, that is in the Mojave National Park area in Nevada, also by Las Vegas. So now to get to like the nuts and bolts, how to get started. So for those who have done maybe one or kind of or haven't tried it, there are a lot of like ways to get going. This is actually the dad of a coworker of ours that was setting up their tent in their living room to make sure they knew how to do it before a trip. But one way in general is just to start in your comfort zone, right? So whether this is literally camping in your backyard so that if something goes wrong, if something you just don't, feel like something doesn't sit right, you can just go inside. Same, go close by, right? So if you're in Pullman, go camp at Kamiak or go on a hike at Kamiak by yourself. And that's just something simple, easy to do. You can come right back, but you get outside and try it by yourself. Or just a familiar place. So for those who, go on daily camping trips or yearly camping trips with family to the same spot every year, just try that by yourself. You know what's there, you know what it's like, you know what to expect. And so you're already reducing some of those like stressful unknowns. Another thing is research ahead. So like Jeff, do what you plan the first time you try a solo adventure. You see a random trail, probably not the best idea to go on that on your first trip out, especially if you have new equipment you're trying out, you're not quite as sure on your skills of navigation and such. So research the destinations, research weather. We'll talk about weather. Research the trails is a great way to do it. And once you have that plan, make sure you share it with someone. My mom always gets mad at me when I tell her, hey, I went backpacking this weekend. And she's like, who'd you go with? And I was like, no one, right? That is not good. Make sure someone knows where you are, when you're leaving, when you're supposed to be back, in case anything does go wrong. And there are a bunch of resources. Another thing to start with is start by going to a state park or a national park or a designated trail system that has rangers, that has park service, that has visitor center, where they can tell you a lot of information before you get there and even when you get there, right? Have there been any wildlife sightings? What's the weather been like? Have there been any issues on the trails? And they can give you a clear go ahead or let you know of any changes that you didn't expect in your research. And then lastly is take self-care seriously. We'll talk about this as well, but if something does go wrong, right? If you get injured, if you get sick, you are relying now on an injured or sick person to get you to help. And so that self-care becomes really, really important when you're by yourself. And again, we'll give you some ideas on how to do that, but something you might not consider as much when you're with a group, right? You have someone else to rely on. When it's just you, you have to make sure you are good to go. Any questions on this? I know they seem pretty general, but just a good way to start your planning. Nice.
Cool. So the types of risks, there are real risks versus perceived risks. So what are the most common risks hikers face? What do you guys think? You can just type it in the chat if you don't want to speak.
Or unmute. Yeah, either one.
Injury.
Plant, animal life.
Yep.
Getting lost. Happened to me.
Yeah, that is a very real fear. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and then what are other risks that you're concerned about that aren't so common?
Mountain lions, bears. That always comes up. And it is
Pretty,
legit. It happens. It's rare, but it does happen.
yeah. It's very terrifying when you actually see one. Like,
I've
heart
seen both
pounding.
now. I saw a mountain lion for the first time a couple months ago. That was not a fun experience. That might have been type 3. I don't think I ever want to see a mountain lion again outside.
Have you seen that video where that mountain lion was following that hiker?
Yes.
That
Yeah, I
is,
saw that. That was crazy.
Yeah, that went pretty viral. That was what? How long was that? Like 7 minutes or
it
something?
was long. Every single time, what scared me was single time he like slightly turned his back, it lunged at him. Like
yeah.
it was watching precisely for an opportunity to do stuff.
And the way that it lunged at him was like completely terrifying. Like
it was fast.
Yeah, you don't mess with like mountain lions.
Great. So just some more perceived risks that we have are like, like we're far more afraid of shark attacks or quicksand than a vehicle accident or carcinogenic hot dogs. Like, in our minds, we build up these ideas that we've seen on TV or media and such and make them out to be like really terrifying. But in reality, the things that we're actually doing in our everyday lives are more detrimental to our health than those notions that we've made up. So like, for example, like according to Yellowstone National Park, the probability of being killed by a bear in the park is only slightly higher than the probability of being killed by a falling tree in an avalanche or being struck by lightning. So like, it's pretty low it's going to happen, but it's just something that you just need to be aware. And because that it doesn't happen as often like as you think it would, that in itself is confidence building. Yeah, you guys have any questions about that?
Yeah, so we say I think I've been backpacking. My first backpacking trip, I was 10. So 20 years ago, I 20 years of experience, and for the first time I saw a mountain lion, right? It's very, very rare. Same with bears. I think in 20 years I've seen 4 bears. And glacier, you're likely to see them, but they're very used to people. I will say that as well in like national parks. So yeah, as Jeff said, it's a fear to have, but don't let it keep you from actually trying something new, right? And going out of your comfort zone.
This may scare you, but that trip to Glacier, I actually saw my first bear. I actually saw 4 bears on that same trip. 3 grizzlies, three brown bears, and a grizzly. Like when I saw the brown bears, I was like, I thought I was gonna die because they had cubs, and it was just terrifying. But like I saw the cubs run, and it was so cute. They were like children. It was so, oh my god, it was adorable. And then the black bear was like, I thought I was gonna die. Like I literally like backed up and like waited like 30 minutes for like, what do I do? What do I do? All right, I'm just gonna go for it. Close my eyes and I just like bike past it. It was all right.
Yeah,
yeah.
and we'll actually, instead of just scaring you, we'll talk about what to do with animals as well. I mean, again, people get outside all the time, and it's very unlikely. So there are ways to mitigate it. But with that, the risks to all of these kind of hazards that you can see on the screen just are a little more important to think about beforehand and plan for when you're alone, right? So I said one of the rewards is you get to see more wildlife, but at the same time, you get to see more wildlife, which could be a problem, right? And when you're alone, you need to know how to deal with it. Also, just kind of know how to avoid encounters with some animals. This might be, again, research ahead of time, knowing where dens are, knowing where migration routes are, whatever it is. Planning ahead of time allows you to minimize some of those risks. And I will say with like grizzly country, I've been to Glacier. I was with a large group because I knew it was grizzly country, right? So maybe not the best place to try a solo adventure or be alone, but that just comes with the planning. Again, you're just really reliant on your own skills, your own supplies. If something does pop up, right, a challenging moment, there's no one to really bounce ideas off. You have to come up with a plan yourself. And so when you're looking at a trail, if you know you're going to be crossing a creek or a river, right, that's a high risk situation that you need to be prepared for. If there's going to be snow travel or potential avalanche, that's another high risk situation you're going to have to be prepared for, and challenging weather. So as you get started, as you get planning, as Jeff said earlier, like pick ideal conditions, at least in those realms, because you're trying something completely new already, and you want to feel safe in every other aspect. Any questions on risks? We're going to talk about mitigation next. How to hopefully address some of these.
Yeah. So the first thing you got to do, I think, is like really, really strong is to play it safe. So if this is your first time doing it, I wouldn't recommend, going mountaineering. Probably just take a hike, before you head up to the higher elevation levels. So, know your skills, make considered decisions in unfamiliar environments. Another important thing is communication. So you have to let people know what's happening, like where you're going to go, and especially your itinerary. That way, if something does occur, you actually have somewhat of a fallback plan, essentially. We have a chat from Anne saying, my husband worked for search and rescue, and I had to remind to tell me where he was going so they could come out and find him when he was hunting. Yeah, that's a great thing to do. Let your significant other know where you are, family members. Fantastic. So work on developing skills like using gear, first aid, and navigation. So before you go out, just make sure that you know how to utilize all your gear, and especially first aid, like know what's in your pack and how to use those items. And your navigation is important. Like if you bought a satellite phone, be sure that you know how to accurately send messages and let people know where you are, or like how to send the SOS button quickly enough to get out of that situation if it were to occur. Because like if something bad happens, you only have moments to make a decision that could change the outcome of the situation. Be aware, be more aware. So hiking without music is something that hiking, a lot of people do with music, but if you're doing it alone, solo, it's probably best to not have music. That way you can hear the surroundings, hear the approach of a mountain lion. If like you don't want to be listening to like Bee Gees and get attacked by the back. And then avoid dawn and dusk. So you don't want to hike too late or too early. That way you can see where you're going. Preventing injuries is pretty key. So preventing blisters, that way you don't hurt yourself further. Staying hydrated and eating enough food so you're able to sustain yourself and you don't injure yourself because you're pushing your body too hard. And being able to have the proper footwear really helps a lot. Your feet are one of the most important things you have. Like anything that comes into contact with the ground, you should take the extra precautions to make sure that you're comfortable. Like wear the right hiking boots. Like you don't want to wear a trail runner if you're going up a steep incline. And then keep your pack weight down. So if you're going out for the first time or you're new to this, you don't want to overextend yourself by having too much gear. Like that could just be as bad as not having enough gear, because you end up not realizing how far you can go and you misguide your destination times. And then another important thing is just to feel safe. So if you're going to bear country, make sure you have bear spray. That way, if a bear does happen to, pop up, you have a mechanism to protect yourself. And pepper spray, or a dog, if you're hiking alone, you probably want to have some sort of way just to feel safe, because who doesn't want to feel safe? Yeah, any questions for the slide?
And I realize that spot device you see in the top, people might not know or have heard of these before. So this is, I guess we're branding here. That's a specific brand, but it's similar to a satellite phone. And it's a way that if you are by yourself and something does happen, like the worst case scenario, and you can't get out, it's a way to send like a 911 call, pretty much is what it is. You just sign up through whatever device you buy. And then when you have a trip, you activate the device, I think for most of them, you do have to pay for when it's activated. I don't think it's that expensive. And then if something happens, all you do is press an SOS and it pins your GPS location no matter where you are. So I know a couple friends who do have them and do use them when they're solo backpacking as a last resort of something, of an emergency situation. So that's another way to feel a little more safe, is you have that ability when your phone's not working, whatever, you can still contact emergency services.
Yep.
Nice. So just kind of key components, and we're going to kind of build on this, is you kind of have to ask yourself, right, as you're planning a trip, is if I were alone and blank happens, how would I handle it? Right. And kind of play out those situations to make sure you have the right gear, to make sure you've planned for all potential changes, and make sure you have a plan if something does happen. Right. And so, as it says, right, although you should already be doing these things and be prepared for problems when you're alone, it's really paramount, because no one is going to be able to help you in the moment. And so part of this is leave no trace. And so this is maybe something you've heard of, either by show of hands or putting in the chat. Who has heard of leave no trace before? See a hand, see some shaking heads. Okay. Yeah, so it's very detailed if you want to get into it, and we'll go through the principles, but leave no trace is a concept that was developed, I want to say in the 60s or 70s, when people really started getting outside and outdoor recreation became more and more popular, and people started to realize that it's popular and humans are leaving more and more of an impact on the environment. And so the mission, and you can go to lnt.org to see all the materials, the educational materials, they have readings, cool videos. But their idea is to promote and inspire responsible outdoor recreation through education, research, and partnerships. And so there are these 7 principles that go with LNT. And the idea is, if you can do these 7 things, you're going to leave wherever you're visiting in the same state as you found it, or better even, if you start picking up litter. Jeff, you want to do the first few?
Yeah. So the first one, probably the most important one, is plan ahead and prepare. So let someone else know where you're going. Let them also know, what time you expect to ride back, and make a list of what you're going to do and check it twice to make sure you have everything. After that, you want to learn how to travel and camp on durable services. So that one is pretty cool in the sense that if you travel somewhere, if you do the less impact, then other people can experience the same thing as well. Because this world's beautiful. You don't want to be selfish and ruin it for other people. Dispose of waste properly. So that's basically learning how to, dig cat holes, whenever you cook, how to disperse water safely such that it doesn't impact the environment and the ecosystem that's around there and the wildlife that resides in the ecosystem. And leave what you find. So this one is, pretty simple. It's if you see a cool rock or a nice flower, just leave it there, enjoy it for the moment. So that way other people can enjoy it as well. I've been very tempted to take some things, but then I remind myself that, hey, what would other people feel like if this wasn't there? This experience probably wouldn't be cool if they didn't see this really pretty flower that was at this bend. I don't know. And yeah. So Jen, you want to take over?
Yeah. And I realize we're going out of order in our explanations. I'm sorry. It's because we have these hand signs to do all of these, which I can show you at the end. But yeah, minimizing campfire impacts is another one. This is something on our trips with the Outdoor Recreation Center. We tend to discourage campfires in general, unless there's a designated fire pit. But they can be important sometimes, right? For heat sources, for cooking, whatever it is. The idea for this one is just, if you do have a campfire, if you decide that's the right decision and it's safe, you're minimizing any impact that it might have, right? So 1, putting it out completely. We've seen some problems in recent months when people do not put out their fires completely. But also, if you do make a fire, right, disperse the ash, disperse the rocks, whatever it is. Don't bring wood that might be carrying invasive species or something else from other areas. Use wood you can find in the area that's local. That kind of thing comes with this principle. And then respecting wildlife. We've kind of talked about the pros and cons of them already, but no matter what, the idea is that is their home. They live there. And so we want to respect that. Part of this is making sure you're choosing proper campsites that are away from maybe nesting areas or dens, whatever it is. If you are overnight and you're cooking and everything, make sure you're storing your food properly. Yes, squirrels really like eating trail mix, but it is not part of their diet and they should not be doing that. So make sure you're storing everything. Also, you're relying on those calories for your own needs. So important that way. Also, Jeff also mentioned avoiding dawn and dusk for like visual purposes, but those are also the times that wildlife tends to be out the most. And so that might be a reason to avoid them as well, is to make sure that you're giving them their space when they're most active, either just by making noise, whatever it is, or just avoiding those hiking times. And last one is be courteous to other visitors. I think I was talking to someone in Pullman who works with the Park Service, and they mentioned that I think in the state of Washington, they're seeing a 200% increase in outdoor recreation. And I know I've only gone on a couple hikes in the last few months and it's been packed. And so the idea is, yay, get outside, enjoy it, appreciate it, but also there's a lot of people trying to do the same. So be really courteous with them. So those are kind of a lot. Any questions on these principles or L&T? It's a pretty cool organization. They do a lot of interesting work. Nice, it is. Okay, first aid kits.
Cool. So first aid kits are mandatory. There are a number of ways you can go about getting one. Probably the easiest way is just you can just buy one from REI commercial kit because they already pre-made all things that you need. They do vary in what they have, but usually the most basic one is good enough. Or you can just make your own if you want to save a little bit more, or if you just are the type of person that wants to dial in your weight to know exactly what you can do, and that's cool too. So depending on your experience and comfort, you may want to carry extra stuff. That way you feel safe. But if not, then carrying less could get you could get away with less if you know how to properly address certain situations. And you don't want to bring what you don't know how to use. So before you embark on an adventure, make sure you know how to use every single item in the medical kit. Otherwise, you're just carrying around extra weight. And then another way to get really good at this type of stuff is just to attend a wilderness first aid class. These courses, they basically teach you how to survive out on your own, and they're very informative and they are extremely confidence boosting. Yeah, that's all I've got for first aid.
Yeah, I would just add for this one, sometimes it's just a simple Google search. I'm not gonna lie, like that's how I created my own, is like, hey, backpacking 101, what do you need in your first aid kit? Because some of the ones you do buy like in packs, which have, blister care, ibuprofen, Band-Aid, all of that stuff. But when you're in like you're backpacking or you don't have access to like clean water, I had to buy and add iodine tablets, right, to my first aid kit. So depending on the activity, skiing, kayaking, backpacking, whatever it is, I would also just do a Google search of what should I bring in a first aid kit during this activity? And you're going to find awesome lists online.
Yep. And that just kind of takes it back to the first principle L&T, planning ahead and prepare.
Absolutely. And I think now I've kind of just taken pieces of multiple kits that I've gotten over the years to make one. And as you get like more advanced, more experienced, if you are like doing like long backpacking trips, you want to minimize weight. So it's just that don't bring stuff you're not going to need or you don't even know how to use, because that's just weight you don't want to be carrying around. And with that, also just thinking of problems with equipment in general is also a way to kind of plan what you're bringing. So it is a good idea to have backups. So let's say for a headlamp, make sure you have extra batteries. Bring a little bit of extra food. If for some reason you're eating more than you thought you would, or you're out for another day, right, a little bit longer than you thought you would, that just may happen situation. It's always good to have a little extra food. We mentioned this multiple times, just have the skills. So if something does break, I know a good example is like if you have a backpacking stove that breaks, you need to know how to fix it because you're relying on maybe that for boiling your water to be clean or for cooking your meals. So know how to fix things if they do have issues. Don't rely on technology. For this, yes, I do use like All Trails and my phone for a lot of things sometimes, but I also bring maps and a compass. If things go wrong, I have a backup. And then test everything out and practice it. I will say there's some really cool gear out there. Just make sure you know how to use it, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Nice. A few more slides and we'll open it up.
Cool. So unexpected weather is something that you really do have to prepare for. So having the basics is essential, and that includes rain jackets, like an outer shell, layers, fleece jackets, your base layers, extra dry clothes, especially dry socks. That is something that like I always bring 1 or 2 extra pair of socks just because, you know, sweaty feet and your feet, you have to take care of it no matter what. Sun protection, you'll be surprised at how often you get sunburn. Like I didn't realize that I got sunburned as easily as I did because I, you know, avoided water for most of my life, but I got sunburned, and that's not something that you want. And then being able to waterproof your gear is pretty good. So for me, when it comes to having extra layers, I've invested in a lot of super lightweight gear. So wherever I go, I always have like my base stuff. So basically if anything does like occur, I'll be ready. And then that's just a good thing to keep in mind if you're doing solo adventures. Like just basically if you have the equipment to handle the weather, like the proper layers, you could be outside in like 0-degree weather and still be perfectly content with yourself because you have all the things to keep you warm.
And yes, Brittany, I agree. Wind can be really tricky too. That's something that coming from like the desert, I didn't really deal with as much, but it can be as simple as just like a lightweight wind jacket that makes a lot of difference. And part of this is just you want to enjoy the experience, right? So, and if you're just wet and soggy for days, that reflection is going to be a little more negative than we would like, right? We want you to think we really enjoyed this experience. We want to do it again.
Yeah, like not having the right gear can change a type 2 to a type 3 type of fun.
Absolutely, it can. And I will also say, if you're just starting out, right, like before you buy these awesome waterproof hiking boots that cost a lot of money, buy a little can of waterproofing spray on your current boots, try it out, and then go from there. There are ways around, you know, buying all the nicest things, and I usually just ask for stuff for Christmas, but eventually you'll build up a stock of gear if you get more and more into this.
Appreciate that, Aaron.
Jeff sharing quote of the day.
You guys can use it.
And so we've kind of already mentioned this, so I'm just gonna go quick, but maps, this is where don't rely on technology. And with that comes knowledge of how to use them, right? So if you bring this topographic map, know how to read it, know about elevation, know about distance, know about directions and using a compass with it, know how to use it. If your fancy GPS or your phone or something else dies, it's always a backup to have. But also GPS devices are awesome. And if you want to use one, I definitely recommend them. Gaia has a really good one. And then I already mentioned the Spot device. You can't do a lot of actual GPS tracking, like trail using on it. That's just the emergency ones, but there are some really cool ones out there. Any questions
Yeah,
on this one?
ju-
It is awesome, right? Jeff, did you have something?
yeah. So for GPS devices, they are pricey, but they're worth it. Like the sense of security that you have with having one of these things gives you enough confidence to do a lot, to venture out a lot more than you normally wouldn't. And if you want to get something like that, if you wait a while, like every now and then REI has like really great deals on the GPS. Like you could like save like $200 on one of them if you like time your purchase right.
I would say any multi-day trip, GPS is great. You do have to be careful with batteries on these. They do require batteries and they can die out. You can also just try like the features of them using apps like AllTrail, where you can download the map ahead of time. And as long as you have it downloaded, even if you lose service, you can still use it as a tracking, just to see what you like, what you don't before you buy a real GPS locator. But multi-day trail is usually good, or even if you're just going somewhere you don't really know very well, or the maps aren't very good. I went to Seven Devils a couple months ago, and the online maps for that area are not great, and so that's where GPS came in handy a lot because the trails weren't well marked.
Yeah.
Seven Devils, yeah, it's very inviting, right? It's actually not too far from here. It's only about 3 hours. If you know where like Riggins, Idaho is, it's just up the mountains from that. Amazing. I didn't see a mountain goat and I was very sad, but they apparently are there. And then yeah, Jeff, rest of navigation.
Yeah, so a compass is something that you probably would want. And a good reputable brand is Sunto and Brunton. And then some skills that you want to know are setting a declination, taking a bearing, and triangulation. So those are some pretty important skills that you probably want to learn. And most importantly, practice, practice, practice. Like you don't want to like buy all this stuff, go outside, and then like, oh yeah, I think I got this, and then you're out in the wilderness and you're lost and you're stressed and you're like, wait a minute, maybe I don't know this, and that's like the worst feeling to come to, like that you don't know. And then so in order to practice, you can take some courses. REI has some great resources that you can go to and see, like, I don't know, they're a free resource. And yeah, so just take courses, that way you're confident going out with non-technology, just the bare bones.
Which can also be part of that type 2 fun, right? Like having to use a map and compass is just a whole nother level of being outdoors.
Yeah.
And we've already mentioned this for the most part, but just the importance of those animal encounters. And this is really just goes back to the planning of that, right? So proper food storage, disposal, making sure you know what's in the area, and being prepared. If you do encounter them, what's the best thing to do? I know for like bears, it depends on the type of bear, what you want to do. Moose, it definitely is a slow, quiet backing up. But it depends. So do a little research ahead of time. Angry squirrels, I've encountered them. They can be very vicious. And then here's just kind of a list of key takeaways.
Yeah, so you want to build your skills. So, your first adventure, probably don't want to go on a, 5-day mountaineering trip. Start somewhere small and realize your potential or realize your limits, and then expand your potential. So some of the things that you need to know how to do well are, dial in your gear, figuring out how far you can go and what type of terrain that you can cross easily, and also figuring out your first aid system and what you know how to do and what you're like prone to. Like some people are more susceptible to getting their ankle twisted. So important thing for them to learn out how an important skill for them to learn is how to use ace bandages to properly wrap their ankles in case something like that happens. So planning ahead to prepare is like key. Being able to know what the weather is, that way you can appropriately get your layering system in, your maps, local resources, and gear. Communicate, let people know where you're going, because like at the very end of the day, if something happens to you and you can't, something happens, you actually have somebody out there that's looking out for you, even though they're not there. The importance of self-care, being able to understand whether you're in a dangerous situation, and being able to like fix that before it gets worse is a good thing to know. So bring distractions, like I'm gonna skip that one. I'm not sure what that's there. But starting out small, so short day hikes, building up your experience. Family picnics are pretty great, and car camping is another option too. Like a lot of these national parks, like they're amazing. Like if you just drive your car, you can just like park in a parking lot, and you can like have these great hikes that are like equivalent to like multi-day trips, all in the comfort of like a few hours.
I actually think that picture might be Seven Devils. I'm not positive. That's our coworker, Hannah. And bring distractions. I think that one was on there for if you're not used to being alone for, days, or even just like you get to camp at 4 p.m. and you now have 6 or 7 hours till you go to sleep. That can be kind of dissuading. And so like bring a book, bring cards, bring something to kind of entertain yourself outside. Because you don't have someone to turn and talk to, which is very different for a lot of people. So just thinking of that.
Okay. So just add on some more distractions. Candy. Like bring something to like look forward to at the end of the day. Like
True,
I never realized how Sour Patch Kids tasted amazing when I'm
Skittles.
tired.
All about the Skittles.
Skittles. Yep.